I'm feeling anxious, and I'm feeling like there's a lot to pack in. I'll have to remind myself to calm down and just try to say it. The impulse, the desire, the push, the pull to press record was pretty strong, so I did it. So this is going to be a series of maybe non sequiturs. A weird way of fulfilling obligations. Symbolic obligations. So I haven't done one of these for a while. The vegan cross. The forbidden fruit. The necessary fruit. Accidentally, and it depends how we define that word, accidental. Hold on. Wardrobe. It depends how we define that word, accidental. Because if we define it within the history of philosophy, history and philosophy of science, accidental, natural philosophy, accidental can mean one thing or another. So, I'm not familiar with where in theology the term accidental is addressed. To my mind, the word accidental is insufficiently addressed within theology. It's a problem. Because colloquially, the word accidental means one thing. Philosophically, it means like three other things. And theologically, the word accidentally it's certainly not in the it's not in any milieu I've come across, and I've searched with relative depth into several breadths of that historical and contemporary conversation. The forbidden fruit, the inevitable fruit, accidentally, a red bell pepper. Who would have thought? I guess I'm enough in to the history and symbolism now that, like, the whole idea of the apple being the forbidden fruit, like, I forgot that like 15 years ago, right? 20 years ago. To my mind, when people still call, like, when I hear it come up that people still call the apple the forbidden fruit, like, I'm taken aback, like, oh yeah. It feels like 1,000 years ago. My understanding is that the origin of that analogy was born with, I think, was it Jeremiah? I feel like it was Jeremiah, but I could be wrong. Not Jeremiah. Maybe Jeremiah. I'll annotate it later. See the comments. who made the connection between malice in Latin for like bad, evil, whatever, and apple. So it was really a literary pun. And then I think, I get my books confused. Please forgive me. I'm just a house painter. I mean, I've read these books, and sometimes I confuse one with the other. So I'm having a hard time now between the Book of Enoch. I often get confused the Book of Enoch and the Apocalypse of Abraham. Both are apocrypha. Both are extra biblical, but they're part of the Mailu. And their influence has affected practically the canon of the church, and to my mind, of the world. Like, there are practical physical effects in the world still living to this day and yet to be fully realized that were born in both the, I think it's called the Book of Enoch and the Apocalypse of Abraham, 2 different books, right? Because there's some theme that has to do with the animal apocalypse, and I confuse which book the animal apocalypse is in and how that has to do with the flood. But it's part of the bigger story. What was I trying to get to? Oh yeah, that also in one of those books, because I confuse, it's kind of like I confuse different actors sometimes, Like, there are 4 actors that, like, I don't confuse all 4 of them, but I'll confuse any 2 of them. Dustin Hoffman, Dustin Hoffman, Andy Garcia, Robert De Niro, and Al Pacino. So those 4 actors, I might confuse any 2 of them. Like, I don't confuse all 4 of them together, but I might confuse any 2 of them in a weird way. It's kind of like, one of my ex-girlfriends from when I was a young man, a very good woman. She was a little bit on the Mary Magdalene side, but, quote unquote, despite that, possibly the nicest person I've ever met. In every way. Possibly. Nice to everybody. Everybody. Took everybody equally and the same. I never realized that till this moment. Thank you for this moment. She's a mother now. And as a young man, I would have suspected this woman has nothing of what it takes to be a good mom. But by the last time I saw her, I knew she was born to be a great mother. Where was I going with that? Something about when, I believe it was Archangel Raphael, took so-and-so to the Garden of Eden, or something like it. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was represented as, in translation, in English translation, as a product of the teleological pole, the Aristotelian final cause. The pseudo-Abrahamic Judeo-Christian omega point, forgot where I was going with that, but I think it'll all register in the end. What's the forbidden fruit? Oh yeah, in that book, in that apocryphal book. I can't remember if it was the Book of Enoch or the Apocalypse of Ibrahim. Anyway, it described the fruit as like the forbidden, or I saw the forbidden fruit, something, something, something. And it was as a cluster of vines. Translated elsewhere, like, you know, the fruit of vines, or the fruit of clustered vines, or something like that. But there is a translation, and I'll take it. I didn't make it, I found it. That describes it, you know, a fruit that is as a cluster of vines. And the fruit that is as a cluster of vines is a heart. Vines, veins. It's not a mistake that vines and veins are, what's that word? We're like anagram, like where you mix up words to make other words. I mean, vines and veins is like the most simplest one, literally, in the world. And it's like, yeah, but that's English, and that's not where things came from. It's not where things came from, but it's where everything went to. Because the English language is the biggest phonetic phenomenon in the world, ever. And as far as we know, linguistically, you know, no offense, this is said out of respect with jest and just as a way to inject levity. Eat your heart out, Noam Chomsky. But like, the English language, lingua, the way everything has collapsed to that, is the biggest phonetic event. It's an ongoing event. Still very small in cosmological temporal terms. Right? The English language is a blip in time. And as far as we know, it is the most sophisticated, advanced means of communication in the universe. The whole we worship this digitalism, and as well we should work for it, work for it. Well, to what end? What's the end of technology? The end of technology is to serve the truth of expression. That you or I can just sit here with this little thing in my pocket, and in my moments of vulnerability, press record and say what's on my mind. Amidst all this technology, all this media, all this bling, 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 bling. Yes, that's happening. But what's also happening, and which is more significant, is that introverts have a platform and technology is saving it. We don't recognize the fact. See, this is the thing. There are very, 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 very intelligent people that recognize that in 10,000 years, these personal video diaries will be the most valuable historical objects in the world. This video I'm making today has little value. Today. In 10,000 years, it will be more valuable than just about anything on the planet today. Why? Because it's intimate and true and human. What's wrong about me will be self-evident to those in the future. And to those in the future, 10,000 years from today, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I hope it's better for you. I'm trying to make the life I have lived impossible. That's what I'm working for. I'm not working for my life and my beliefs and what I want the way I want them, because I know what I want is corrupted. I know that. My sins are, well, whether or not they're original, depending on how we define that term, origin, with an I or an E, but I certainly have inherited sins. I have innate sins, and I have habitual sins, etc., etc. And I have mostly fallen to my free will habitual sins. One of the things I've decided in my life is that despite the fact that I'm a sinner and I'm the least qualified to talk about truth, God, justice, honor, that even though I'm a broken vessel, even though I am destined for the dark, man, I'm destined to go to hell, man. Or at least that's how I feel. I'm still gonna fight for the fucking truth. The good. Even though I'm destined for hell, I'm not gonna give into it totally. Even though, there are holes in the dike, so to speak. The levee is leaking. It hasn't broken, but it's leaking. And if I'm the levee and I'm to break, if I'm not strong enough, at the very least, it's my obligation to scream to the country. Get to high ground, that's all. So often, the holy preach to the compromised. But it's also the obligation of the compromised to preach to the holy. Say thank you. The holy need the appreciation of the lowly. They need it. It's payment. We lowly hear you, you high holy. In the same way that the lowly have always needed, if not praise, at the very least, the welcoming of the holy. We, as the fallen, as the broken, as the desperate, as the destitute, we, fallen, broken, destitute, desperate, unholy, we, like me, like most of you. If you're still here, I mean, you know what I mean at least. I don't really mean that of you, but I do certainly mean that of me. Am I hoping for a miracle? Of course. Every day. I've seen a couple. I wasn't worthy of the, I won't say little, because to me they weren't little miracles. Even though, I guess when I say little miracles, I mean they weren't obvious to thousands of people. So to me, that would be a bigger miracle. And that's probably just because I've seen too many movies, right? Am I still hoping for an enormous miracle, a huge miracle, a life-changing, earth-shattering miracle? Of course. Why? Well, one of the reasons is because of my sin of sloth, because I'm really lazy. And if there's any way God can do something for me that I don't have to do, I'm all in on that. yeah, I'll take that, right? If God can do something for me that I don't have to do for myself. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned it before, but I think it's something worth thinking about nowadays, is pride is often called the greatest sin. I'm just curious about it. I think it's worth talking about. I'm not challenging it necessarily. But suicide, like if you're prideful, you don't kill yourself. And killing yourself, in a sense, is the greatest sin. But it's also, I forget, the Eastern Church has this term for like sins that aren't your fault, but you still pay for, you know? Like if you're like if you have a miscarriage, or if you're violated, like if you're raped, like it's a different, I forget what they call it, like the Byzantine Catholic Church. I'm not sure if it's a completely Orthodox thing, but like I forget what it's called. I'll annotate it later. So check the comments. But like it's a type of sin that's like you still have to confess, even though it's not your fault. So if you have a miscarriage, or if you're raped and you feel guilt, like you have to confess that guilt still, but it's not your fault, but you're still infected with a sin of guilt. In some ways, that's the ultimate sin, because you've been taken advantage of in a way. For whatever reason, God determined this is not to be, or this harm is... But God's always leveraging, giving you a lesser harm today to avoid a greater harm tomorrow. So one of the reasons why we say, why do people suffer? It's like, well, you know, why did God take this person away? But what we don't ask is, this person was destined for death. and was meant to die before, but was given a little bit more time? Why did this person get sick? They got sick today because they were meant to get sick yesterday. And in some cases, yeah, perhaps. Why did I become a drunk? To keep me at home, to keep me from causing havoc in the streets. Or where I would have caused more havoc and created more death upon people and death upon myself had I kept interacting in the way that I was. So instead, God said, the best I can do for you, considering your choices, is to make you a drunk and keep you at home as much as possible to keep you out of the way of people. Why did this happen to me? Because I'm out of control. And God did the best God could with a man out of control. I should already be dead, so looks like God did a pretty good job. Doesn't look like it from the outside. Doesn't look like it from the inside. But yeah, I can reason that rather simply. I'm still an abomination. But I'm still here. Which means I still have the opportunity to awaken to a kind of thought, to a kind of love, to a kind of being. And because we think we get older, we reach our peak, our summit, and then we begin to decline. So I am in my own declination toward death. And this is the empirical evidence, right? Yet, there's this other kind of growth. Because even though I'm reckless, in a very cowardly way, I'm not reckless like a Hell's Angel. I'm very self-destructive. Anyway, this is turning into a sob story. What I wanted to get to is that I haven't done one of these for a while. A vegan cross ritual, right? Order. The Order of the Vegan Cross. I still hate the name, but there's kind of nothing else to call it. Anyway, this reminded me that this is so there's a little sticker with a little barcode on a red pepper. Quantify this. Digitize a red pepper. Digitize the taste of a red pepper. Right? Digitize that, my friend. It reminds me of that, what is it, that Bible quote, the twain shall never meet. I forget exactly how it goes, like the clay and the iron, or the clay and the metal, or the clay and the bronze, like some about clay and some about metal. The twain shall never meet. Right? And it reminds me of, like, a lot of times, like, in the morning, I'll just, like, grab a red pepper, and if I have some hummus, I'll grab some hummus out of my fridge, or, like, I'll buy some on the way to work, and that'll be my lunch, usually with, like, half a cucumber, and, these days, that's my most go-to lunch, but not that it's perfect at all, But anyway, every so often, I'm such a hurry, I'll just, like, break open my pepper, blah, 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 get out the seeds, da-da-da, and start dipping and eating, da-da-da-da-da. Watch some YouTube on my phone. And sometimes I'll forget to take the sticker off, and I start chewing it, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I got the sticker. The twain shall never meet. It's like the princess and the pea. You know when something ain't right. So this little mark is what convinced me to make this video today. I'm already feeling like I shouldn't have, of course. I mean, this is stupid, but this little mark. There's a prophet who told me a story back in 2015, and I've been waiting for the resolution of that story. It just so happens it's today. It just so happens it's the anniversary of my personal, accidental, depending on how we define that, consecration to Agnes. I wouldn't have used the word consecration then, but now I recognize that I accidentally, through the inspiration of the Holy Ghost,